Hilb?
Hilbert Group purchased German American, and that's who our insurance is now. And our renewal is up, and I think I told you the good news is at the last meeting that they're holding our rates the same as this past year. But I'm going to have Tony come and explain another idea he has, a little more creative approach that I believe can save us some money this year. But I prefer him to explain it. But another interesting thing I was telling between meetings a moment ago, a few weeks ago, I attended the meeting at actually the mayor's conference in Prince Lick, and you've heard me speak before about the AIM Medical Trust. Well, Gary Malone is now the director for that, and he and Tina up there is like old home week seeing him. And I was surprised to see him, hadn't seen him for a long time. But this insurance trust is a state, it's a statewide pooling, basically what it is. Municipalities got the state. I was showing earlier, if you look at the state of Indiana right now, I don't know if you can see this or not, but they're gaining membership. More and more municipalities are participating in this medical trust. What it does, it pools them together, so if one particular municipality has a bad year, your experience is rated as a group instead of your individual business or municipality. So I was familiar with that in our business. We did that for years. But as it turns out, we had a quote from them as well, just so we can entertain quotes. And it's interesting because the company that insures this trust is United Healthcare. Of course, everybody knows this word United Healthcare, but I had a quote from them, and it seems to me like, Tony, if I'm not mistaken, our total premium already was around $325 or something, same as this year.
Yeah.
Well, their quote was $399. So you can see the concept is a great concept, but they've still got they've not got the premium down. It would be advantageous for us. But I thought that was interesting. I wanted to report just so we had taken some other quotes. And what Tony does for us, he usually shops this through with various companies to get us the best premium. And it was interesting. I'll let him explain this. But it was interesting, like I said at the last meeting, that they had held a premium for us. So what if it was $325
Yeah.
last year, I don't remember.
Yeah.
It would be the same this year. So the good news is we knew we had that locked in our budget because we had health insurance, of course, budgeted. And the good news is it's actually not going to cost us anymore. And in fact, Tony has a proposal for us to consider as a way we might be able to save some money that I think makes a lot of sense. But if you would, Tony, you might explain what you have in mind.
I will. Just as RC talked about, it's been a year ago in June that the company called the Hill Group bought the German American Insurance Division. And so they are I wouldn't call them a national broker, but because they pretty much run all along the eastern seaboard. They've been expanding to the Midwest, but they're like one of the top 20 national brokerage firms in the country. So they've been doing this for a long period of time, and it's a lot of agencies over the course of time have been purchased. It's harder to find just that locally owned independent shop anymore. So the German American obviously thought it was an opportune time for them to divest. They sold it for a nice penny, and so but what it's done is we were a good shop, German American, had good people, but we just didn't have some of the resources that we have now. We have data analytics, we have our own compliance people. We always had to try to outsource those and basically, try to get that outside expertise through our relationships. But now we have in-house legal, we have in-house actuarial teams, we have in-house IT that can put together data analytics on all your claims data. So that's just, the first 2 pages just kind of tell you who we are and some of our solutions. So you can just kind of go through that. If you go back, I think the pages are numbered. Apparently they're not.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, they are.
Are they? If you go back to page 20, this gets us into our price comparison and a little bit of a look at the plan design. And that page would look like this here. And I apologize for the small print. Brian, I'm like you, I'm struggling with it.
Oh, and hold it for you, Tony.
I try to get stuff on one page, and I just keep shrinking it and shrinking it. So the first 2 columns just show our current plan that we've had with SIHO. We probably had it 4 or 5 years, maybe a little bit longer, Tammy, I'm not sure. But it's been with SIHO. SIHO is based out of Columbus, Indiana. They are close partners with Deaconess, and so we've been able to had pretty good success with SIHO the last few years, just being able to keep our rates relatively stable and flat. If you look at the bottom down there, you get to the total estimated premium. We show what the current premium is, and as RC mentioned, it's around $325,000. We did get a renewal in at a rate hold and got it in at a flat rate. The plan design, and I'm just going to highlight this. The plan design. Go ahead.
You notice to the left, see, we're showing 20 participants, correct?
That's, yeah, and we had that census, we verified that, Tammy, and we sent it to her 2 or 3 times to verify. And so the premium has stayed the same, but basically what we've had in the past, and RC, I'll let you talk a little bit about the reimbursement, but the plan that we've been purchasing is a $2,500 deductible plan with an 80% co-insurance after that. The maximum out of pocket for the individual is $6,000. Basically, like I said, it's an 80-20 plan. There's a $150 co-payment if they went to the emergency room, $40 co-payments for urgent care facilities. Office visits for primary care was $25, for specialists $40. Preventive care under the Affordable Care Act requires preventive care to be covered at 100% with no cost shared to the member. And then you see your co-pays for generic medications and preferred brand and non-preferred brand down at the bottom. Well, what Purist has done, this is a plan that has been built by the Hill Group organization. The administration is based out of North Carolina, but they have access to all of our networks that we use. And what they've done over the course of time is everybody, we always worry about overutilization in the plan. Are people going too often, too frequently to the doctor? Do they, are they driving our costs by doing that? And what we've learned over the last several years is those are not the situations that blow up your health care costs typically. I mean, what in 90% of my groups, probably 20% of the population is driving 80% of my claims. It's those large claims. It's those tough medical conditions that are either high surgery costs, high medical care costs, or high prescription costs, which are just continuing to climb. So, what's happening is these costs, continue to go up as healthcare costs continue to go up. What Purist wanted to do was to try to bring a program that would protect you all also while keeping a good, manageable, deductible type of floor under there, and to be able to, because what we've seen in our employer markets is every year that deductible is raising. They're either raising the deductible, raising the out-of-pocket maximum, changing plan designs and stuff. So the intent behind this was to try to build a plan that was easy for employees to use to get care that they need, while obviously protecting them against those high-cost claim situations.
You mentioned something Scott and I have been on the council when he did this, but I'll explain something to you when he referred to the deductible. For many, many years, I don't know how many years ago we did this, the employees just had a $500 deductible, and the premium was being so expensive, we decided to look into what we currently now have, and have had for a number of years, a $2,500 deductible. The policy is based upon $2,500 deductible. What we did, we increased the employee deductible from $500 to $1,000, even though the plan has $2,500, and the city has self-insured that $1,500 for the employees. So the employee has currently, as far as they are concerned, they have a $1,000 deductible. Yeah. But our plan is based upon, as you can see right there, it says $2,500 for the individual in the upper left-hand corner. What that means is, I felt like, and if you remember, by doing so, I remember Andy, you're going to headline in the paper, city reduced the premium by a huge amount of money, and which we did. We reduced the premium by going from the $500 deductible to a $2,500 deductible, but it was a significant savings. But what we did, we self-insured the difference between the 1,000 and the 25, and because we also felt like we had a lot of younger employees, and the savings each year on the premium was more than offset what we've been having, and that's been the case too. We maybe had one year possibly, but we've never had very many situations where we've actually had to help pay for something like that. We've been fortunate. So I wanted to point that out. Do you remember that, Scott, or was that before you?
It might have been before.
It's been a while. We've been doing it. It's been a number of years, and it's been very successful for
Yeah.
And in fact, it did say premium. So now what Tony's gonna lead you into next is, like just what he said, more and more employers are having to go with higher deductibles. And in a lot of cases, obviously, it's impacting employees. So
Yeah.
we've been fortunate to limit their exposure to the first $1,000. And going forward, I think you'll see that that's not going to change. But go ahead.
Yeah, and what this plan has done is, we've had for years, there's been employers that have bought a plan from Anthem or United Healthcare or someone like that, and they've maybe bought a $2,500 deductible or $5,000 deductible, and then they kind of self-insured that deductible underneath to get down to the $1,000 or $2,500. That's been pretty common. Used to be just pretty informal, and it's similar to here. The employees would bring the receipt in to their HR department or whatever, and finance would then reimburse them or whatever. More and more employers started doing it, so there's what they call health reimbursement arrangements that a lot of employers have, where they're buying that $5,000 deductible or maybe a $10,000 deductible, but then they're only giving the employee a $2,500 deductible, and then they're reimbursing that gap. Well, what this plan does is built on that concept, but what they do here is on this plan, you're actually buying a $9,200 deductible for the individual, but what we're doing here is we're taking that deductible down to $2,000, and we have what we call a gap plan underwritten by Globe Life that steps in and pays the difference between that $2,000 deductible and that $9,200 deductible. So as opposed to the city having to say, okay, we're going to raise the deductible to $5,000 and we're going to reimburse more of that deductible to try to keep the employee whole, what's happening here is we're able to do it by our plan design so that we would have that $2,000 deductible, which then lowers the city's exposure by $500 while that employee still has $1,000 that you're reimbursing. So that makes it, really dovetail nice into what you're doing. And I don't know if any of you, through where you worked, have bought like the accident policies or the gap policies or those types of things. That gap policy that's out there in the marketplace, that's been out there for years, is a wonderful solution, and it's really a nice solution to kind of accomplish that goal. But the problem with those gap plans that are out there when you're doing it with a medical plan is you have to file a claim with the medical carrier, have to file a separate claim with the gap carrier, similar to what you do with Aflac. If you had something that was going to be covered under your medical insurance, but Aflac covered it also, you have to file two claims. What this is this is all integrated, and so all of the gap information is on the member's ID card, so that when they go to submit that at the doctor for a claim, that goes both to the medical administrator that's paying the medical claim, and it goes to the gap company that's processing the claim also. So there's only one submission. They don't have to worry about submitting the claim 2 or 3 times to be able to get all the reimbursement. It's just integrated into the plan. So what happens on this is once that employee meets that $2,000 deductible, then the gap plan steps in and starts paying 100%. So from that standpoint, that comes into a lot of help for the employee. They don't have to worry about, anything in excess of that $2,000 expense.
Really, in this particular situation, the employee would not be treated any differently than they are right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, because they still have a $1,000 deductible, and the difference between that and 2, we would be
Exactly.
self-insuring thing, just like we have. So they really don't feel the
Exactly.
difference. It's all in
Exactly.
the plan.
The other nice thing that they do with this plan also is that once that deductible's met, the out-of-pocket exposure for the employee is almost limited to what their co-pays are at the doctors and prescriptions for pharmacy. Whereas with other plans, those types of expenses still get running into your overall expense, and so it makes it really nice for the employee that if I do have something that pops up and I meet my $2,000 deductible, then for all of my office visits, all of my prescriptions, I'm just going to pay and be done with it. So that makes it really nice from that standpoint. The other thing that they're doing here is, one of the things that I really like, is they offer the generic medications at zero cost to the employee. So if the employee's taking generic medications, they're not going to have to pay anything for those. And that's a real nice benefit, because we all know how expensive prescriptions are getting.
generics are even getting somewhat expensive, but, you know, your brand names, your specialty medications, they have separate copays, but your generics are gonna get those at no cost. And most of our information tells us that 80% of claims are generic claims. You know, they're the, got a sick kid, you know, antibiotic, those types of things. But there could be some medications that people are taking on that 90-day supply, you know, on a mail order basis. But if it's a generic medication, it's gonna be covered, you know, for them at no
I
cost.
think that's what we ran into last time, with all the medication the employees was taking, they couldn't get no longer.
That's right. It was an insulin, particularly people with diabetes. Remember that? It was something about the,
There's blood pressure medication.
yeah.
That formulary, the list of approved medications is called a formulary, and the pharmacy benefit managers that run the drug programs for the insurance companies, they're always moving things around on there. Sometimes they're tier 1, sometimes they're tier 2, sometimes they're tier 3. And it's supposed to be based on the efficacy of the drug, but a lot of times they're moving that around based on what kind of rebates that they're getting from the drug manufacturer for those pharmacy claims and stuff. So, and we'll talk a little bit about some things, some added benefits on this program here in just a minute. But for all intents and purposes, what's happening here is we're taking the plan that you have from SIHO that was at $2,500 deductible. We're taking it down to a $2,000 deductible, which lowers the city's exposure for that. They'll still reimburse that employee after $1,000, but then the gap starts taking over once they get to that, where that deductible space, the co-insurance space would be, and so then they'll have coverage at 100% on that. So it really does enhance the benefits for the employee. If you go back to the page 21. This is just kind of some bullet points related to the overall intent and benefit of the plan. Based on the plan design, we're lowering your premiums, and let's go back to the pricing just so you can see real quick.
Now, Tony, are you talking the Purist Health 1212 or the 1218?
We'll talk about both of those.
Okay.
We can talk about the 1212. I want to give you an option on the 1218, and I'll explain that here in just a minute.
Okay.
The premium that we originally talked about is $275,000. So that's roughly that $50,000 of savings that RC's talked about, plus lowering the exposure to $500. I don't want to minimize it, but if you're not having a lot of utilization in that employee reimbursement, it's not a, you know,
Yeah.
it's not a game changer from that standpoint, that makes sense. But having that, you know, saving $50,000 in premiums, that's starting to become real money at that point in time. So when we talk about lower premium by design, the reason that we're able to have that lower premium by design is because we've got that gap plan set in there that sets connected to the plan, but the claims that are paid out of that are not paid out of your money, or they're not paid out of the underwriting medical, they're paid out of the global life. So that helps lower the cost of the premium. You know, if we took this plan and priced it like we did and didn't have that $9,200 deductible with the $2,000 cap, we would see probably our pricing would be pretty similar to where you're at with SIHO right now. You know, so that's how much we're able to generate savings from that standpoint. So we should have lower premiums just based on the design of the plan. International prescription sourcing. I don't know if any of you are, I hope you're fortunate enough not to have to deal with health insurance every day like I do. But yeah, if you know anybody that's taking a specialty medication, those are for anti-inflammatory conditions, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, those types of things. Specialty medications can cost a plan up to $25,000 a dose. Skyrizi, Stelara, those are high-cost specialty medications for anti-inflammatory conditions. Those are $25,000 to $30,000 medications, and that's not as high as what some of these medications do. What this plan does is it sources these medications from internationally from pharmaceutical manufacturers in Canada, in England, and those types of places. that are meeting FDA standards in the United States. And those members, if you're using those, the difference in the cost is so much that the employee can get that medication at zero cost to them because it saves the plan so much. The example I use is on one of my self-funded accounts. There's a Stellara on there that's about a $27,000 drug every 6 to 7 weeks. That member is getting that drug sourced to him at no cost, and it's costing the employer approximately $6,000 to $7,000. So it's saving that employer $20,000 every time they fill it. So by having that ability to get those prescriptions from, approved overseas manufacturers that, again, are meeting FDA standards, that has the potential to generate a significant amount of savings to you guys. The other thing that happens is when we talk about full drug rebates, all along the time that you guys have been fully insured with SIHO and with Anthem in the past, what happens, this gets into kind of the weeds a little bit, but let's just say that Lilly has the medication that they generate, and I don't know enough about what all medications they make, but let's just say they have a prescription that they're manufacturing. What they do is they negotiate with the pharmacy benefit managers to get that drug placed in their formulary. We talked about that list of approved drugs. Tier 1s are typically your lower cost drugs. Tier 2 are medium cost, or what you consider your preferred brand. Tier 3 are non-preferred brand, and then you get that specialty medication. Rebates from the manufacturer to the pharmacy benefit managers typically is in the 40 to 50% range. So if you've got a drug that's hitting your plan that's $500, there's probably in the neighborhood of at least a $200 rebate that's coming back to that pharmacy benefit manager that's managing your program, your prescriptions. And what happens under your SIHO plan, your current SIHO plan, or a plan with Anthem, they keep the rebates. You don't get those. So on this plan here, if any of your prescriptions that qualify for a rebate, they get paid back to you. The rebate comes to you. We don't keep anything. So that can be a significant savings. If you just figure in $50,000 of total RX spend for your group, that's probably a low number in all honesty, but let's just say that we had $50,000 of RX spend, we might get 40 to 50% of that back in a rebate. So that gets paid out. It's got a long tail to it. It normally trails 3 to 6 months after the fact, but they typically pay those rebates out on a quarterly basis. So there's a potential that there will be some savings generated from those prescriptions that are filled into the plan that you'll get rebate back on. So that's potential savings there also. The other thing is, in this program, is for your drugs, there's no spread pricing. What that means is, what happens, you guys are familiar with TrueRx or TrueScripts, it's over in Washington. They're a transparent PBM, and they are very good about returning rebates back to the members. But what happens on spread pricing, and neither of these pharmacies do this, but a lot of these pharmacy benefit managers, what they're doing is the pharmacy benefit managers negotiate with the manufacturer on the price of the drug and those types of things. And then what they'll do a lot of times is you'll see that they put spread pricing there, and they may buy that drug from the manufacturer for $100, okay? And so when it goes to the pharmacy and runs to that PBM, they may mark it up to $150, and that's all going to the PBM, that's all going to the pharmacy benefit manager. So with this, and with our PBM that's doing this program for us, there's no spread pricing. What they pay for the medication is what it gets charged to you guys for the medication. So there's none of that hidden pricing, there's no difference in what I'm paying for a medication. I'm not building additional costs on the prescriptions that your employees are filling. So it becomes, again, what it does is whatever dollars we can keep the carrier from having to pay, that helps us build our cost savings, and then also helps us at renewal time, because we're not always pressing against that maximum claims liability that we have. Claims control through stop loss and supplemental health, again, we talked about that. The way that we're able to bring that kind of the savings to the members is because we know that we've got that, we've actually bought a $9,200 deductible, but we know that we've got that gap plan that's gonna come in there and step it down and pay it down to a $2,000 deductible for us. So that's when it's talking about the supplemental health plan. The other thing that's nice on this program is once we get everybody enrolled on this and moving forward and get enrolled, we'll be able to see what they tell us our fixed costs are, which are your premiums, your administrative costs, and it will also then tell us how much they're allocating to the claims fund. And we'll see that on a monthly basis. And at the end of the year, whatever's left over in that claim fund, it takes a little bit of time to settle because not all claims get paid in the year that they were incurred. If you have somebody that runs out and has a big claim in November or whatever. But typically 3 to 6 months after that contract, if there's any money left over in that claims fund, that's refunded back to you. So you know, what it looks like really, for all intents and purposes, is a fully insured plan with a refund arrangement. So like with Sino, what you've got is a fully insured plan. Now let's just say that your premium, $325,000 premium was Sino. Let's just say that we had $280,000. Let's just say that out of that $350,000 premium, $170,000 of it was set in the claims fund. Okay. If our claims were less than $170,000 with Sino, doesn't matter. That they're keeping that money. Okay.
Sure.
If your claims are under this plan, if we've got that $275,000 premium and they say, okay, we think $150,000 is allocated to the claims should be enough. If we come in under $150,000, we come in $125,000, that $25,000 that claim fund gets refunded back to you all. With Sino, the way it works right now, we just talked about that. If they projected it to be $175,000 and you came in $150,000, they keep the underwriting margin. That's why insurance companies have big, nice buildings.
Sure. Sure.
If you go over that amount, your costs are guaranteed. You're in a guaranteed 12-month contract. Okay, so with Sino, so if your costs go over that, they can't ding you in the year for that. But what happens is it affects your renewal pricing.
Sure.
Okay? But this plan here, if we set that at $175,000 that claim max, anything under that at the end of that contract term gets refunded to you. If if we set it at $175,000 and we have $250,000, they can't come and ding us for it this year, but on the renewal,
Yeah.
they would do the same thing that Sino would do, would affect our renewal pricing.
Sure.
So.
That really, Tony, that's similar to that pooling very similar to the pooling I was talking about.
Yeah.
In other
yeah,
words, if you have a good year, they would
Yeah.
actually pay a dividend back, when in this case, it's just another
Yeah.
term for a dividend.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah, exactly.
right.
We've got 5 national networks that we have available to us, plus we also have local networks. This quote that we've got is assuming that we're using the Encore combined network. It's a regional network for Indiana. It's got all the providers that you're going to want. It's got Evansville, it's got Deaconess, it's got Ascension, it's going to have Memorial, it's going to have Good Sam, it's got Davies County, it's going to have your facilities up in Indianapolis. There'll be minimal, I don't anticipate any network disruption in what you've got from that standpoint. And then if you have employees that are traveling on vacation, obviously, and I sometimes you ask me what time it is, I tell you how to build a watch, so if I'm going too far in the woods, let me know. But what happens is under all healthcare plans now that are qualified health plans, emergency care has to be treated in network regardless of the facility. I don't know if anybody remembers hearing the term balance billing or surprise billing or whatever. Before the Affordable Care Act, if I'd had a heart attack and was on a network that didn't have Deaconess, and I ended up in Deaconess's hospital, they're not in the network. I didn't have the network protection, and they could bill me whatever their bill charges were and stuff. Under the Affordable Care Act, they did away with all that. So if you have a medical emergency, it doesn't matter if you're in network or not, it gets treated as an emergency, and they can't balance bill you for the difference. You know, the discount at some of these hospitals and with the networks may be as much as 40 or 50%. So just imagine if you had a program that didn't have the balanced billing protection that the Affordable Care Act has, you could easily get yourself in where you're paying twice as much as what you would have to pay. But so under the Affordable Care Act, with the No Surprises Act, if I'm getting treated at an in-network facility and they bring out-of-network providers, anesthesiologists or radiologists or whatever, if my facility is in network in an emergency or an elective procedure for that matter, and they're contracting with out-of-network providers, they can't balance bill you for that. So from that standpoint, we feel like we do a good job with the network of protecting you. The issue that we have when you go on vacation, in the event it's an emergency, you still are going to be treated as in-network because they can't balance bill you for that. But if it's that elective procedure, you know, Johnny gets a sore throat, Johnny gets sick on vacation or whatever, we've got a nationwide RAP network called First Health, which is owned by Aetna. So for those types of situations that wouldn't necessarily qualify as an emergency, members would be able to go on and call on their customer service card if they're in, you know, down in Florida, down in Destin or Orange Beach or whatever. They can look up the provider to see if they're in the First Health network with Aetna. So they have, you've got basically national networks that you're working with too, from that standpoint. There is a telemedicine solution. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on it because basically it's like a teledoc. I don't know if any of you guys have ever used teledoc. It's virtual care where your members can use those virtual care services. There's a lot of that going on now. Where I will tell you though that if there is situations where, if you go that next slide right there, there's potential that members could get, or just not the next bullet point, I'm sorry. There is potential for the employees to have waived services such as CT scans, MRIs, X-rays, blood work, durable medical equipment, and diabetic supplies. If they call that telehealth number and work with them, and they can search in this area to see if they've got contracts with anyone in this area, there's a possibility that the employees could have these services done and use that telehealth piece at no cost to them. So I really like that. Also, we've got mental health benefits, which are standard. You know, they basically mental health services are required to be covered the same as what they would say any other illness. And this is a nice thing here, and you have RC and Tammy will have access. They won't necessarily have access to personal health information, but to have access to see where all the claims are going, how much they're paying in prescription costs, how much they're paying in medical costs. So if we are having a bad year, you know, they get a monthly reporting package that they'll be able to look at, and it takes a little bit of time for that data to flow, you know, maybe 3 to 6 months of lag time for it to start flowing. But, you know, right now we have no idea what's going to happen to our renewal until we get it, because SIHO doesn't release any information. They'll be able to see 6 months in, are we performing well, or are we running hot against what we think our claims spend is. So it helps prepare in the event we do have some adverse claims activity. It helps us, you know, be able to prepare for our renewal a little bit, so we're not just shell shocked. And that's really pretty much it. Again, the primary advantages are that we're able to lower costs, number one. But I do think with the employee the co-pays for this plan are $25 for the primary care, $50 for a specialist. And then again, getting the generic medications at zero cost. I just think overall that this has the potential to set us up to maybe, like I said, with the transparency, see a little bit more what's going on with our claims activity and being able to save some money and helps us kind of prepare for the future from that standpoint.
So as far as, is your opinion, I know we've discussed it, is it your opinion as far as the employee is concerned, they're not going to see a significant difference in the way the claims are handled, and as far as the coverages, it may be as good or better than what they currently have?
I think so, and what we would do, because it is a little bit different, what we would want to do is we want to try to have a meeting with the employees where we schedule it, where we just go over this with them. You know, they're always available to call me at any time, but just an initial rollout,
Sure.
Have a meeting where we can kind of explain this and let them, help them feel comfortable with it. And, you know, from that standpoint, I think it's got the potential to be really beneficial to the employee from that standpoint.
And like I said, once again, the column we're referring to here is the middle one, 1212.
Yeah, let me go over that real quick.
Okay,
just so
yeah.
you know. The 1212, when we write a self-funded contract, or self-insured contract, and like with, just go back to SIHO, we're on a fully insured contract, and what SIHO is responsible for are any claims that are incurred during that 12 months. Okay, so from December 1 to November 30th, SIHO is responsible to pay any claims that are incurred during that time frame.
So it's not January 1, it's actually December 1?
Yeah, December 1.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't.
So what happens is, obviously, they're gonna pay the overwhelming majority of claims in that time frame, but you've got September and October and November, where it's a possibility that a claim could happen there, and SIHO may not even see it until, sometime in December or January. But because it's a fully insured contract, they're obligated to cover that claim, okay? On self-funded plans, you have to make a determination on what kind of contract you're buying. And I know this is kind of out in the weeds a little bit, but what we quoted here is a 1212 contract and a 1218 contract. And what that means is on the 1212 contract, that any claims that were incurred during that contract and paid during that contract would be covered. What we added also is what we call terminal liability. If we don't like this plan, and we come into renewal next year and you say, Tony, this is the dumbest thing we've ever done, we want off of it. If we don't have the 1212 contract with that terminal liability, we would be responsible for any claims that were incurred that didn't get paid. And that terminal liability, that's why we've got that on there, okay? What most fully insured groups do is they buy the 1218 contract because that gives them 6 months of protection after the incurred date of those claims. And what we're recommending, or I shouldn't say recommending, we want you guys to have the decision to make the choice. If we buy the 1218 contract, we're still saving some money, but we're not saving as much as what we are on the 1212 with the terminal liability.
But that gives you that protection for those additional 6 months for anything that occurred during that 12-month period.
And it costs us about $23,000 or $24,000 in savings to do that. So it's, so we're, if we do the 1212 with the terminal liability, we're looking at $50,000 savings. If we do the 1218 contract, then we're looking at about $25,000,
27, I think, wasn't it? 298 versus 3 1/4, 15, 11, mid 27.
I personally, I probably shouldn't say this. I think the 1212 probably gives you enough protection with that terminal liability. But, if you want to just make sure that you've taken the extra step of precaution, that 1218 does give you that additional 6 months.
So regardless, if we were to shift away from SIHO to this plan, the minimum of savings there, that 27,000 versus the other plan, which was up to almost 50, it just depends on, that's the uncertainty nobody knows.
And I don't want us to forget the potential savings in the drug rebates, because I think I don't want to say, it's not nothing. I don't want to say it's going to be overly substantial, but it's not nothing,
Right.
You're going to get some money back in that over a period of time. And then the other thing is the potential to have money left over in your claims account matures. I think it makes it worth the consideration to make the change.
The interesting thing about that, Tony, if I understand this correctly, the difference between the 12 and the 18, you absolutely have no control over that. Somebody has a bad situation in November,
Yeah.
and the claim doesn't get turned in for 2 or 3 months. All of a sudden, if you're on the 1212 program, you're kind of exposed there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize
We've got
that.
terminal liability that would protect you against a certain amount of it, but
Yeah.
the 6 months pretty much catches everything for the most part.
Yeah, you do have a little exposure there for what could be significant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I would have to think, granted, I'd like to say $50,000, but you are accepting quite a bit of exposure, because most of those claims would be settled and handled within 6
Yeah.
months.
Oh, yeah.
But if you ran into a situation where it wasn't, you could be exposed for an extra, it could be a very large amount.
Well,
that's pretty, yeah.
And the other issue is that a lot of the network contracts specifically what Encore's is, and I'll try to find out for you. But like on most carriers' contracts, like Anthem, United Healthcare, and a lot of the insurance carriers, or the networks, the providers have up to a year to submit a claim. You know, now if they don't get it done within that time frame, then there's no obligation, but, you know, so, you know, things fall through the cracks, claims, you know, I've had claims that all of a sudden came up, you know, there was, I mean, fortunately, there weren't anything big, but maybe $2,000 that, you know, for somehow it was just late getting submitted or whatever, you know, but we don't want to leave you guys out in a situation where all of a sudden, you know, all that savings we thought we were getting,
Yeah,
you know, is at risk, and so.
yeah. That's interesting.
What my other recommendation would be, and we didn't get a chance to talk about this, but, you know, we're at November 17th. If we would decide to we can renew a silo for a month if we wanted to, hold our rate, and then have this begin January 1st. And that does two or three things. Number one, we can get everything set up for December 1st if you want to do it that way. And it'll take a little bit of work, we'll have to push a little bit. Coverage would begin December 1st, it might be 2 or 3 days later before members actually get their ID cards, but they would still have the coverage. But the other thing that would happen also, or has potential to happen, is your deductibles are in calendar year. Doesn't matter when your plan renews, it runs from January to December, okay? So if we would change plans right now to effective to December 1st, our new carrier is going to have that new deductible that would then turn around and reset in January, you know? So what we have to do in those situations is we get a report from the carrier that we're moving the coverage from, called an accumulator report, and you'll get credit for that. Your employees will get credit for that. They won't have to come back and repay that deductible and stuff. But it just adds a little bit more confusion and adds a little bit more time to it. Whereas if we know where we're at with SIHO, we can renew for 1 month. Our deductibles don't change, our plan stays the same. Our deductibles, anything that our employees have had towards their deductibles with SIHO, that just keeps going until the end of the year, and then it would reset anyway. So it takes us away from having to worry about, okay, what are we doing about people that have already met expenses towards their deductible, how do we get credit? Come January 1, if we do this January 1, it's a free claim start without all of that excess baggage. And it gives us more time to get everything turned in, to make sure the employees have their cards on time, and it gives us time to meet with the employees and without rushing everything, to explain everything and answer questions.
So basically, if I hear you, Tony, and correctly, what you're suggesting to do that January the 1st.
Yeah.
And also, you think probably the 12/18, because of that exposure we're going to have.
That gets you the most protection, yes.
Right, I hadn't thought about that.
And I think, you know, we've had groups that have made the plan change in December before. You know, I mean, it's not something that we can't do, but it just, you know, this makes it a much cleaner break.
Well, there's really no point in doing that.
Yeah, you know, if our cost was going up, you know, in December, you know, the fact we've got a rate hold, you know, where,
Right.
you know, I think it takes better care of the employees to do it for January 1.
Right, I think so too. Okay. Very good. Well, the good news is, it's well within our budget for next year. We have, regardless, it's either the same or less.
Yeah.
And,
What our next steps would be, once you guys decide how you want to proceed,
Right.
is we would, you know, also, we have some paperwork we have to get done. I think the majority of what we can do is, I think it'll be pretty quickly. I don't know that we have to have a paper form filled out. I think we'll have some sort of paper application. What we're trying to do is we're trying to do as much of it online and electronically as we can. So I'll get back to you on what that would be, but we got plenty of time to get everything set for January.
I think you definitely need to talk to the city employees, sit down with them, because I'm pretty certain that their concern is gonna be the prescription medication, what's covered and what's not covered.
Sure. And that changes all the time, even with SIHO, you know, with their PBM.
Yeah, I just know last time they they didn't really know until they went to get their medications, and it was like, well, it's not covered anymore.
Yeah.
And then they had to scramble to try to find something that would work.
When we get if you guys move forward, when we meet with the employees, we'll just say, hey, if you've got any questions about prescriptions, get us a list of them, and we can find out where they're at on the formularies.
Yeah, we definitely need to do that.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Okay.
That's all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. We, I don't want to forget something here. I had this in front of me, too. I want to be sure and read. We got this today. This was sent to the mayor and Tammy and Jody and Scott and John Mellizer, Brian Willis, and Cullen Cook. Thank you for your support and gift cards after my accident. This allowed Paul to come home and drive back to Louisville to visit me. Your support with Paul's work schedule was also very appreciated. Thank you, Paul and Lindsay Collier. So she was in today, and she's doing remarkably well, I thought, considering what she went through. That's really something. When you hear her tell the whole sequence of events, what transpired in just a matter of minutes, she's very, very lucky.
And what was it again? I forget.
Remember, she was refueling something, wasn't she, Kyle?
She was trying to she was just trying to burn cardboard.
Oh, no, that's what it was. That's what it was. Yeah, and it exploded on her really and burned her body really badly. And she was very lucky that in the whole sequence of events, there was somebody there who got to her. She jumped in the swimming pool, and just when you hear her, the whole story, it's really remarkable, and she's doing very well. But I want to be sure and read that. Well, on what Tony was doing, I think, to me, particularly from the quotes and all we've seen in the past, we've been fortunate that with SIHO that it has been able to hold that premium where it is. This is an opportunity to save some money and try it. It sounds to me like the coverage is just as good, or if anything, maybe a little better, I don't know. But they're all very similar in that regard. But Scott, you bring up a good point right there. I remember that now, that situation on the medications. So I don't really know. Let me talk with Tony Moore a little bit about that, because it would be my recommendation to make the switch to try to save. I was thinking we were going to save $50,000. But when he talks about that on that back end on those final months, I would like to know a little bit more about that, because I don't think there's any question if you have a claim that occurs while you're under the contract, they're going to have to pay it. But the concern I had was if the claim doesn't get handled in a certain amount of time. It looks to me like they'd still be obligated to pay it. But that's a question, I don't know that I understood that correctly. But because there's no question, if you have the claim during the contract period, they have to pay that. If they can't handle that claim and they don't get it handled properly, it's not
Yeah, and
not
they
our
could
fault.
do that a
No,
lot.
why wouldn't they do that? I mean,
Yeah.
that's terrible to say.
No, but it
under
makes sense that
contract.
they would.
But it's interesting, why then, what that extra 6 months, or, I'd like to hear, I want to know a little more about that, but because you can see the difference in the savings is significant. But, I'd like to know a little more about that exposure, as to why maybe the 1218 would be better than the 1212, because I think that's what Tony was saying. Didn't you think he was? I think he was saying it was his recommendation to go with the 1218, and if maybe nothing else for the first year to see how we do on claims. But that scenario, it still looks to me like they're under contract to pay the claim, but I'd like to hear a little more about that, because there is significant difference. There's another 25,000, but I think in lieu of what's happening with all the uncertainty with our budget and where this thing's going to be going the next few years, I like this creative approach. In other words, I like that protection where that gap company is obligated only up to from 2,000 to 9,200, so you can see they're handling the little stuff, but the big stuff is covered by the primary plan. So you see how there could be some cost savings there, as well as the performance of your claims. If you come in with a good year, there might be some rebate back to you in that claims fund, where if you have a bad year, it can't go above that. So I like the creative approach they're coming up with. This is sounds like a very big broker that has access to plans like this, where I didn't even know this existed, but I like his recommendation. I like that plan. The only question, and from the employee's perspective, they're not gonna feel a thing because their deductibles, they care about what their deductible is, what it costs when they go to the drugstore, they go to the doctor. That's really what they care about. But as far as how the plan sets them up, they're protected very well. But that's a good question. I remember going through that on some of those drugs, and that was a big deal. So,
And I realize that they're gonna change and what's covered and what's not. But this way, they're giving a little insight before they get there to get it.
right,
They're
yeah.
not blindsided by
Right.
saying, well, we can't cover that.
Right, so, and I like the idea of going to January the 1st in December. There's no point in rushing into this right now, because it would be my recommendation that we will go to I think when I want to hear more about it, probably the 12-18 is a safe way to do that. Try to save some money there. It saves at least going in about $27,000 over SIHO. And then if we are successful with our claims, and who knows about that, there's potential for a little more savings. So that would be my preference. But I think also, once Tony starts on all this, that would be the time to have that meeting and explain all this thoroughly to the employees, because he can do it much better than I can as far as the drugs. But everything else seems to be relatively the same, and I don't think they would even feel it other than what you're talking about. And we need to know that. I don't know how big of a deal that would be. But as far from our perspective, there's some potential for some savings there. And I think, and more likely, just as good as coverage as what we had before. So
So procedural, does it take the city council's approval for renewal of?
I never have, as long as it stays within our appropriated budget. But I brought that forward this year because in the previous years, I get the quotes. And in the previous years, it's been SIHO every time, pretty cut and dry. But because Tony is recommending this, I want everybody to be aware of this. And if anybody has any input, I'd be glad to hear about that. But as far as the city council, they've approved the budget. Health insurance is in the budget. So now I would see if we're asking for more than that. If it's going up, that might be a different situation. But as far as otherwise, I don't think so. But I want your input, though, and that's the reason I wanted Tony to come explain this, rather than me say, let's just do this, because it is within our budget. But I also believe there is some potential here going forward. And everything I hear about the Senate bill, just real quickly, is we're going to feel it in 27 a little bit, but you're really going to change in 28, 29, and 30. So the thing I like to see about this is a creative approach to provide the good coverage, and at the same time, try to control our expenses a little bit. And that's basically what this is. So that's why it would be my recommendation to try this and see, like I say, it's just a one-year contract, and see where we go with it. But that's like I was talking about the AIM Trust. It's a similar concept by pooling everybody together. And it is really experience rated as a group, where in this case, we will be experience rated by our claims. Like he said, if we have a good year, we could have some money refunded back to us. But if we have a bad year, you know as well as I do, it's going to be reflected in your renewal. And that's why, one another reason, we've had a pretty good year with SIHO this year, and the renewal was left alone. So that would be my recommendation, but I wanted everybody to hear it, and I certainly want your feedback on this. Okay? But I would say, I believe, I would agree with what Tony said. There's no need to rush into this. If the renewal is required by SIHO for 30 days, which he sounds like it is, because you can change this every 30 days. It's not like property and casualty insurance where you're locked in for the year. Group health insurance is on a monthly billing basis, so you can cancel and start any 30 days if you want to. So there's no penalty for doing that. So I'm inclined to think I would follow his recommendation and go with the, most likely the 12-18 plan, and see how we get along for 1 year, and set the whole thing up January the 1st. That's how I look at it. So, but like I said, I certainly welcome everybody's input and whatever you think on this. Still think about it a little bit. We've got a few days, but let me know. But I'm inclined to say that's what my recommendation would be, to follow his recommendation and see how we get along for a year. Assuming it doesn't impact employees on their prescription drugs, like what Scott's talking about. If there's something out there that I'm not aware of, or we're not aware of, wouldn't you find out? Right? Everybody good with that? That's all I've got. You guys have anything? How about a motion to adjourn?